Welcome to The Juggle is Real. I'm Andryanna, and today I am joined by two guests whose work I have admired for, a really long time. If you are a parent of a child with ADHD, chances are you've come across the Childhood Collective. I mean, their content is practical, it's evidence-based, it is so incredibly relatable, and probably most importantly, it just helps parents feel less alone. I know that's been my experience. The Childhood Collective was founded by child psychologists Dr. Lori Long and Dr. Mallory Yee, along with speech language pathologist Katie Severson, and drawing from both professional and personal experience, as well as their professional expertise. They've been, raising children with ADHD, and they created the Childhood Collective to bring parents these evidence-based tools, encouragement, and so much support. Together, they host the top-rated parenting podcast called Shining with ADHD, and they provide resources through online courses, blogs, social media, and a global community of ADHD families. Their mission is one I know so many of you will appreciate. It's to help parents feel supported and capable while helping children with ADHD understand their unique brains' strengths, build their confidence, and thrive. So today we are talking about one of the biggest challenges that many of us face, which is how to support our children with ADHD without carrying everything for them. So we're going to talk about executive functioning and independence, building their confidence, the habits, routines, and those transitions that can be tricky, sibling dynamics, and how to reduce some of the mental load that we parents find ourselves carrying. We are heading into that very busy fall season and back to school and all of that. And so this conversation is going to help you, your ADHD kiddo, and the whole family. So let's dive right in.
This is the Juggle is Real podcast. I hope you feel seen, that you realize your worth, lighten your load, and prioritize your own needs. As we hear from leading experts and well-known faces in the wellness, entrepreneurship, education, and motherhood space, I hope you gain insights, proven practices, and learn actionable tools to help you enjoy the juggle of work, family, and everything in between with a little less stress and a lot more ease, joy, and fun. Most of all, I hope you find what you need to simplify, streamline, and supercharge your own journey of better balance and self-love. Are you with me? Let's get started.
This episode of The Juggle is Real is supported by Whirlpool. This won't be my first school season with the kids, and one thing I've realized over the years is that back to school isn't just about getting the kids ready. It's really about getting your systems ready. You know what I mean? Because once homework starts, we've got hockey starting, and then we're eating dinner at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. Lunches need to be packed again, and everyone's water bottles somehow multiply overnight. And it's really those little routines that make the biggest difference in a smart appliance that helps you stay on track. That's one of the reasons why I love my Whirlpool appliances. They have technology that doesn't just keep up, but actively optimizes my day and performs at the highest level. One feature I think busy families will really appreciate is the new Whirlpool dishwasher with spin and load rack and AI intelligent wash. It's the first and only dishwasher with a 360-degree spinning lower rack. So instead of reaching over bulky pots or baking dishes or meal prep containers, you simply spin the rack and bring it within reach. It is such a smart design, especially, if you're doing those Sunday meal prep sessions or after a busy weeknight dinner. It makes both loading and unloading so much easier. And the sensor cycle takes all of the guesswork out of settings for you. It uses an AI intelligent wash that is designed with sensors to adjust based on, what's actually in the dishwasher, to detect how dirty it is, what the load size is, and the best water temperature, whether it's lunch containers, snack cups, or that pan you roasted your dinner in. You can trust AI intelligence to do the work for you. When your intelligent appliance works hard to ensure your kitchen looks stunning and performs flawlessly, you get a little more room for everything else that matters. To learn more about the new Whirlpool dishwasher with spin and load rack, visit whirlpool.ca. That's whirlpool.ca.
Now let's get back to the episode.
Mallory and Katie, welcome to The Juggle is Real. I am so looking forward to this conversation. I'm so thrilled that we are sitting down together. Thank you so much for being here. How are you both doing?
We're really excited to be here. Thank you for having us on. We're just really excited to chat.
I have so many questions, and I know back to school, it's a beast, right? And so there's so many things I want to chat about. But before we get into it, I've been following along and listening to your podcast for many years, and it's been so supportive. But before we get into it, can you just let us know a little bit about yourselves? I know you're experts in your fields. You're also moms who you're in it too, right? You're raising children with ADHD yourselves. So just as we begin, can you share a little bit about your personal, professional journeys and then what led you to create the Childhood Collective? Mallory, would you like to go first?
Absolutely. So I'm a child psychologist. I have my master's degree in special education, PhD in school psychology. I've worked in the schools. I've worked in pediatricians' offices. I've worked in private practice. Obviously now doing the Childhood Collective. And so I feel like I've kind of, worked with families in a lot of different settings, worked with children in a lot of different settings. And Katie and I always joke that even though we have these advanced degrees and this professional experience, it doesn't 100% prepare you to actually parent neurodivergent kids.
So true.
And so sometimes Katie and I reflect back and we laugh about things that we used to advise parents and tell parents to do at home to help their child before we were parents ourselves. And now we look back and we laugh. We're like, I can't believe we told a parent to do that. And I think that, I can't believe, Katie jokes. I can't believe I used to tell a parent to, cut a bagel into 1,000 pieces and make your child request more every single time. So just little things like that. And I think that having the personal experience has really enriched our professional knowledge and expertise and how we can really help families because now we live it and we know what's real and what's practical. So kind of having both the professional experience and the lived experience has been so helpful and just in both aspects of the personal and professional lives. And obviously we're here now with the Childhood Collective. I'll let Katie elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I'm a speech language pathologist, and there is actually a third member of our team, Lori, who is luckily for her on vacation right now, but she's also a child psychologist. And so really all three of us have this background working with kids, supporting families, definitely a lot of, kids on the autism spectrum, kids with ADHD, learning challenges, speech and language difficulties, and we all overlapped for a short period of time in a private practice. And one of the things that happens when we're doing these evaluations, families come in, they say, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, like help, right? And we would do these evals. And for the families who, for example, got an autism diagnosis or a dyslexia diagnosis, there was a pretty clear path, definitely a hard path, but we were able to say, here's the steps, here's how you get support at school. That's written into law. It's very supportive generally. And in terms of kids with ADHD, that parallel didn't really exist. It was sort of like, yes, you have ADHD. That's going to be life-changing and best of luck, right? Like we could recommend parent behavior training, but where do you get parent behavior training? I can't find it in my town that I live in, or there's a wait list for 8 months and I'm struggling at home or at school. A lot of times ADHD can be sort of fall through the cracks because kids with ADHD do so well many times in school, and maybe it's not a grades issue, for example. And so how do we get support for those kids? And we realized this is actually an area, not just where we live in Phoenix, Arizona, but kind of more broadly. And so we started creating these online resources as a team with kind of this multidisciplinary approach to help support executive functioning, help support parents at home, help them navigate the school process, which can be tricky. And that's really how the Childhood Collective was born. And like you mentioned, we have a podcast, we have a lot of resources, but really it is that hybrid of our personal experiences and our professional backgrounds where we're trying to keep things relatable, manageable, realistic for parents, because I think it can be really overwhelming. And, we'll talk about this probably later, but a lot of times if you're raising a child who's neurodivergent, you yourself or your partner may also have neurodivergence or be neurodivergent. So that can be another layer to figuring out like what supports do you need? So yeah, that's kind of how we came together, and it's a pretty awesome thing that we get to do.
It's a very awesome thing, and it's been so helpful. And it's kind of full circle for me because one of the first episodes that I listened to of your podcast, and this was many years ago, and I was traveling alone for like a work trip, and it kind of was like about a school thing, and I can't remember what the American phrases or term is for what we would call like an IEP, sort of like that individual plan for your child who is neurodivergent to support them in the classroom. And I had never heard of it. My son at the time was like, I think kindergarten age. So like we had just received our diagnosis. So I was just like, this is so helpful because I wouldn't have even known to ask for it or to think about it. And really just like that advocating for your child is like, I've learned that a lot through your work. So thank you so much for that. I would love to, oh yeah. And I would love to start with executive functioning because it might be like a memory jog for some of us and reminders for some of us, but one thing that really does stand out in your work is that you do spend a lot of time helping parents understand executive functioning. So like for a parent who's listening and maybe they've heard the term or they kind of understand, they're not really sure what it means. Can you share what are some of the ways that executive functioning challenges show up in day-to-day lives? Why is it misunderstood? Maybe Mallory, you can support us with this one.
Absolutely. So I think executive functioning is kind of a buzzword, and I think most parents have probably heard it, probably on social media. But what really is it? It's this constellation of a whole bunch of different skills. And we like to think of executive functions as kind of the GPS of the brain. The GPS of the brain helps you get started, helps you know where you're going, helps you get from point A to point B, helps you navigate detours along the way. It helps you reach your goals. It helps you accomplish tasks. And Katie always likes to say when executive function is working well, we don't really pay a lot of attention to it. It's not something we really think about a lot. But when there's a delay in the executive functioning skills, that's when it starts to become a problem. But a lot of times parents don't even realize that it is executive functioning. That's kind of beneath the struggle, beneath the challenging behavior a lot of times. And so a lot of people think of executive functioning maybe like remembering your water bottle in the morning and putting it in your backpack so you can bring it to school. But executive functioning is so much more than that. One big piece of executive functioning that we talk a lot about that is huge for kids at home and at school is planning. So just making a plan about what you're going to do and knowing how you're going to get there. And the way that this shows up for a lot of kids, and it can be really frustrating for parents, is kids having a really hard time getting started. And the reason they're having a hard time just getting started is because they are having a hard time visualizing the future picture. They're having a hard time visualizing what the plan is actually going to be. And if you don't know kind of what the destination is, yeah, it's hard to get started. You don't know where to go, where to turn first. So planning is an executive function. Another one that we've talked about recently on social media is cognitive flexibility. And this is a huge one. And again, it's one of those that parents might not really realize that like underneath the surface is an executive function. So changing plans when something isn't going as expected. So like with the GPS, it's like sometimes you'll get that alert on your GPS that's like, would you like to take this other direction because we detected traffic over here, or here's a detour for you. So it's the brain's ability to kind of say like, oh, the original thing I was planning isn't going to work out the way I thought. So I'm going to take a different route to get there. But how does that look for kids? So that can look like really big emotions when things don't go to plan if they can't then kind of have that cognitive flexibility to make a new plan. So for example, they're planning on their friend is going to come over after school and they have this list of things they can't wait to do with their friend at their house, but then the play date is canceled for whatever reason. Cognitive flexibility would give you the skill of be like, okay, we could find another time. Maybe tomorrow my friend could come over and today after school I can do something else instead. But instead, kids who struggle with cognitive flexibility might get really stuck on the fact that their original plan isn't happening and they can't think through other options. And that shows up as big emotions. And that's a challenge for parents then about how do I manage my kids' big emotions, which is something we hear all the time. And again, comes back to executive functioning, controlling emotions and things like that. So there's just so many ways that executive function is showing up in our lives and our kids' lives all day at home and at school. And again, when things are going well, you're not thinking about it. But when things are really a struggle, that's when these executive function struggles are kind of brought to the forefront, and parents are kind of left to sometimes manage for their kids, be their child's executive functioning, which is a challenging place to be in.
Yeah. And when we think about the executive functions, they are developing throughout childhood, right? And even in neurotypical brains, we don't see them fully being developed until maybe age 25, 26. And when we think about ADHD brains, which is kind of our area that we specialize in, we can anticipate oftentimes about a 30% delay in those executive functions. And that's a reframe that we offer to parents, because so often when our child isn't doing what we wanted them to do, or following that plan or being flexible, maybe like I have a 9-year-old and I have to sometimes reframe that and be like, okay, actually his executive functioning is probably closer to like a 6 or 7-year-old. And that really helps me, because if my 6-year-old was crying about the fact that the cookie spilled on the floor, whatever, I would be so much more supportive and open to that, versus 9, you're like, oh my gosh, but you're 9. And so when we reframe the executive functioning as this is an area that is delayed, it is developing in kids with ADHD, but it's slower. And that's something that can really help parents to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Even if your child is gifted or advanced in a lot of other areas, they can still have these delays in executive functioning.
I think that's what's hard for a lot of parents too,
Yes.
is that kids with ADHD can be very smart. They can be gifted. They can have very high cognitive skills. And so this is what we would call asynchronous development. Like when your child's intellectual abilities are not matching like their emotion regulation, that's hard for us adults to be like, you can have a conversation with me about the galaxy and black holes, but you can't handle your frustration when the cookie has spilled on the floor and is now broken. And that is hard, because then we have high expectations for our kids. Like, why can't you do this simple thing when you can have those type of conversations with me? But again, that comes back to executive functioning and how those skills are still developing for kids with ADHD.
I think it's just so helpful to keep in mind at all times. And yeah, as we support our children to have that understanding, which I know it can be challenging, absolutely, especially when we see other people or we have other family members or other children. Sometimes it can be a challenge. You mentioned, Mallory, the water bottle, or they're forgetting things. And I know for myself and many parents, like we just feel like we're our child's personal assistant. And I mean, maybe for all children to a certain degree, but especially for those who have ADHD, you're helping them remember the assignment or pack their lunch or their sports gear or whatever that might be. And so it's like helping them manage and remind them, constant reminders. And so I feel like sometimes we might assume that our child just isn't like motivated, or they're just not following through. And I would love to kind of just chat about like how, as parents, how can we tell the difference? Because sometimes it's not just that they won't do it, it's like they can't do it, or like, how is this distinction really important? And then of course, every child is different, but like, I guess something that I struggle with personally is like, how do we support our child versus like doing everything and like over functioning and like being like their everything, So like, maybe Katie, you can start here. Like, how do we support our ADHD child without becoming responsible for everything and kind of taking away that independence that they should be learning?
I think that is such a good question. And to be totally fair, I mean, that's something that I ask myself all the time. So I think the first step probably is noticing that, especially a lot of us moms tend to be, I like what you said, over functioning, and just pausing and being like, oh, wait, what is happening right now? So I do think that's a really important, that awareness is definitely a good first step. But when it comes to things, your question about, is it that they can't, is it that they won't? I kind of generally like to think about it as, you need to go below the surface. So for example, I might tell my kids, okay, get your shoes on, we're going to leave. And 8 minutes go by. In my mind, we should be driving in the car, right? Like there's no question. But I look at my kids, they don't have their shoes on. The shoes are on the floor. Someone is doing something totally different. And I might say to myself, okay, so they just are refusing because they know how to put their shoes on. They know how to tie their shoes. They know where the socks go in this little cute basket right by the door, right? And so it's really easy to presume like, oh, they're being really defiant or they're willfully not being obedient to me. I put that in quotes. But I think a lot of us were raised with that expectation. Like, I tell you to do it, you do it right away. And what we have to think about is when we say, oh, maybe they can't do it, it's not that they can't put their shoes on. It's not that they can't tie those shoes. My kids are able to tie their shoes. If you have a younger one, maybe it's Velcro or Crocs, right? Like some kind of slip on. But really getting to the point of, again, those executive functions, because that's probably where the breakdown is happening. And in that case, it might be that they can't, to some extent, get started, for example, or see the future picture to know, okay, this is what we're trying to do. And this is not to say that then we just go in and we tie their shoes for them, right? I have a 12-year-old. I do not want to tie her shoes for her. Right. But it's really about reducing the barriers and also setting them up for the most success, right? And this can get, we could talk about this all day, and it's going to depend on each individual situation, but thinking through less about like, oh, they know how to put toothpaste on their toothbrush, and more about what's happening when they walk up the stairs that's stopping them from brushing their teeth. And it's going to be things like inhibition, which is a huge executive function, which is like, I see it and I just immediately start doing it. To be fair, I also struggle with this. Like, I will be emptying the garbage and then I'll be like, oh, I forgot to flip that laundry. And the next thing you know, I'm like weeding the garden and the garbage is still sitting there and the laundry is not changed. Like, it's hard to inhibit when you have a thought, especially when you have working memory challenges. It's kind of this learned response of like, I have to do it while I'm thinking about it or I'm going to forget and it's going to get left forever, which is unreasonable, but also very reasonable. If you know, you know. And so I think for our kids, it's the same kind of idea of like, we're expecting them to walk by their unfinished train set that they were playing with and this random ball that they were fidgeting with. Maybe they lost it for a few days and the dog dragged it out and now it's sitting there. You know, we're expecting them to kind of ignore all of those things and stay on task to get to the toothbrush. So again, it's not saying that we don't expect them to successfully brush their teeth or put their shoes on, but it's reframing it because to start with, we don't want to get super frustrated. If I'm just assuming that my kids are defying me all day long, I'm just going to be walking around in a gray cloud, right? So starting with like, what are the skills under that they need help with? And then from there, we can kind of get curious about like, okay, what supports would be helpful?
Yeah. And I think this is a really important distinction too between can't do or won't do, because if we're assuming that our child is willfully defying us, it's a won't do kind of situation, what do we jump to as parents generally? We jump to punishments, right? We think, you're not listening to me, so I need to come down harder, and there's going to be a consequence for not listening to me. I'm going to punish you. But when we look at something as a can't do, whether it's you can't tie your shoes or it's whether you can't inhibit those distractions along the way to tying your shoes, we approach it in a way where we say, okay, this is a skill we need to work on, and I'm going to help you do that. What kind of support do you need to be successful? So that's the difference between approaching a challenge by thinking punishment is the solution versus approaching a challenge saying, me and my child can work together to get them the support they need to be successful in this really important life skill. And that's why it's really important to make this distinction, and kind of coming back to your question too of like, how much do we help our kids? What's that fine line? And that's like a line that we're kind of always walking. And we actually were talking this summer about maybe it's a great time to start pulling back on some of those supports we've been giving our kids that they've outgrown. They don't need that support anymore, but we were so used to doing it for them that we're still doing that. So we're constantly reevaluating, does my child still need help with this? Or do they still need this level of support to be successful with this? So it's something you're always reevaluating and playing with and seeing how much support your child needs. But absolutely, the goal is always to, get your child the skills to be independent and be successful. But you're figuring out things along the way, the supports that they need to be successful. And I also just want to say a lot of times those supports, maybe they're always going to need that support. Maybe it's not you doing it for them, but it's the support of a visual schedule. It's the support of an alarm in their phone to remind them that it's time to take their medication. Because even as adults, we use those kind of supports and strategies to help us with those kind of daily executive functioning tasks. So it's helping them find what works for them and slowly relying less and less on us to get those things done.
And if you're listening and you're like, okay, but I just want like one strategy, one that I like to start with. Okay, just like love the philosophy, but like let's get to the
yeah, exactly.
I would say that one strategy is we are constantly, as parents, as moms, we are running through a list in our heads. We are re-navigating. We're going, oh my gosh, I totally forgot this. I need to go over here. Don't forget that. We have to, okay, this is all our internal monologue that we have. And most people do have an internal monologue. And we know that for kids with ADHD, when their executive functioning is lagging behind, they are not necessarily using that kind of an internal monologue. So there's a couple things you can do. One, you can externalize your monologue, which sounds a little nuts, but you can do it. You can say, okay, guys, we need to leave. We need to be there at 4:15. So it takes about 20 minutes to get there. It takes you 7 minutes to get in the car. So what time do we need to leave, right? And you're actually bringing your kids into that problem solving with you. The other piece of that is asking them to process it. So I've been using a lot of what should you be doing? What do we need to do? And it's a little shift because otherwise I would say, okay, go grab your shoes. We need to get your water bottle. We're getting in the car. But instead I will stop, and it is very hard for me. I really need things to be efficient. I also struggle with wait time. So it is like, I know I could do it faster if I just tell you, but I have to pause and say, hey, what do you need? What should you be doing? And when my child is looking at the ball and going and chasing it and making up an entire elaborate game with points and all the things, it's very cool, but it's totally not the moment. I will touch his shoulder and I will say to him, hey, what should you be doing? And I'm not mad. I'm trying to kind of break him out of that pattern that he's in. And I would love for him to think about what he should be doing. And the cool thing about that is you're not giving a ton of support, but if he really couldn't come up with what to do, then I could start prompting him. So to your question of like, I don't want to overly prompt, or I don't want to be everyone's frontal lobe, of course. So you can start with a lower level prompt. Hey, what should you be doing? What's the plan? And then that many times might be enough for him to be like, okay, actually, here's what it looks like. And if it's not, you can always add one more thing. Hey, we're going to go swimming at grandma's. What do you need? And kind of slowly scaffolding up. So that's one way to move more of the responsibility onto your kids. And I've been doing this with my kids for many, many years. And my 12-year-old, she really does do pretty well with this. So I will say to families like, hey, it's not overnight. Like you asking your child, what should you be doing 3 days in a row is probably not going to fully build and crystallize that skill, but it is a slow process to building that internal voice of, okay, here's where I'm going. What do I need? Or what time do I need to go? Like those kind of questions.
This is so good. And I love the curiosity behind it, like, is it that they're not going to do it because they're, trying to be a jerk? Or is it like, oh, like, yeah, they just need a little bit of encouragement or like a little bit of prompting, maybe, like that question to support them. And I think that's so helpful. And you've kind of been discussing, and we've been like talking about, sometimes when there's siblings in the picture. And I think something that I struggle with personally, I have 3 boys. One of my children is neurodivergent. The other 2 are neurotypical, and one needs more support than others. And now, we've been talking about executive functioning. Well, 2 of my kids are quite close in age, and the younger one has now exceeded in many of those skills. And so it can create frustration, or like there's some confusion among the siblings, because they notice that there's different expectations, or there's different accommodations, and maybe oftentimes there's more attention being directed towards one child for, good reasons or bad reasons. But, how do we navigate these dynamics? Of course, we want to show all of our children we love them all the same amount. We want to support them all in the ways that they need. But sometimes these dynamics can be tricky. So how do we meet each child's needs fairly, while not taking away from, sort of that family dynamic? Mallory, do you want to start with this one?
I think this is something that a lot of parents worry about, and is on a lot of parents' minds when they feel like there's one child who does just need so much more of your attention and your time. And I tell my kids all the time, fair is not equal, but everyone gets what they need. Fair is not the same as equal, but everyone gets what they need. And even if some children in your family are neurodivergent and some are not, all kids have different needs and all kids have strengths and all kids have things they're working on. And so I like to frame it more as like, this is something that your brother is working on right now and he needs my help with. Just like that time where you were working on this and you needed my help with this. And so I think just kind of framing it as like we all have strengths and we all have needs. And as your parent, it's my job to meet your need. And it's my job to make sure everyone's needs are met. And that might look different for each of you because fair is not equal. Doesn't mean everyone gets the same thing. And that's not what you want. But I think it's also great for parents to kind of keep in mind if you are falling into this dynamic where one child is getting so much more of your attention and so much more of your time, being really proactive with the others to carve out that intentional time to be one-on-one and talk to them and hear them and love them and learn about them and talk, just being proactive and making sure, even if it's not, again, fair is not always equal. Even if it's not a 30-minute for a 30-minute thing, carving out that time to spend one-on-one time with your other kids can really go a long way to prevent some of that challenge, frustration, resentment. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say all the same things. And in my house, it's sort of a little bit unique in that I do feel like there's been seasons where each of my kids have absolutely needed more of my attention. That's obviously going to be different if you have a child who's really medically complex, for example, or something where, you're in hospital stays or just like very long periods of time, then that's obviously going to look really different. But for me, it's been kind of this, we jokingly call it whack-a-mole. It sounds terrible, but I'm like, you kind of like hit that one and it's like, oh, much better. And then this other thing comes up. I don't hit my child, just the situation. But I think it's just like, hey, this is something that we all need to be aware of. And I would also encourage you as a listener, to think about your village and who you can call in for reinforcements. So, for example, I have one child who went through a series of ear tube issues, which isn't like a huge surgery, but it's kind of takes a lot of time and, appointments and follow-ups and things like that. And so I just made a point to reach out. Like, we're lucky to have some family in town, and ask my mom, hey, can you pick up so-and-so from school and help with these things? Maybe like take her for an ice cream cone. That makes everything better. And kind of just calling on whether it's a friend or, a partner, someone that can also pick up some of that. Because I think, again, as parents, like, we have this idea that we need to provide for emotionally for all of our kids all the time. And that's just not realistic, especially when you do have a kid who is struggling with behaviors or struggling at school more and you need to be in meetings or things like that. So don't hesitate to expand that circle a little bit and say, okay, I cannot do it all, and that's okay. Who can help me? And that's going to look different with each one, but kids love that. I think, that can feel really good to have like special time with this aunt or whatever. Don't undersell that. That could be a really big benefit.
Yeah, take off some of that pressure. And I love that phrase that fair is not equal. I think we're going to have a little chat at home about that too when these things come up. That's so helpful. I do want to talk about back to school. We are heading into a new school year. And of course, we want to set our children up for success. We don't want to have to completely reinvent our whole lives. But I've been really trying to think about, sort of these systems that have been built, in society and trying not to force my child into, these systems that might not work for them and how their brain is wired and just really trying to support them through their strengths. And so, we've sort of started talking about with, the prompting and the curiosity and helping them, with, that executive functioning, these routines. I think they can make a big difference. But what routines can sort of have the biggest impact? Or like once school starts, how can we begin, to help them with this transition, which can be challenging for many families, for many children before that first day arrives? Like, do you have any ideas or sort of, like you're saying, I know you're going to want like, do this, like how can are there certain routines that you think can be helpful for children as they transition into back to school? Katie?
Yeah, I think that, at least for us, the summer is so much more laid back. And I know that my kids, they tend to do the best when they stay with pretty consistent going to bed times and waking up times. But we do have kind of a creep that happens. Like, we're traveling, we're across time zones, and, maybe they're staying up late to watch a movie in the pool or whatever. It's just very different. And in a lot of places too, it stays light so much later in the day. Here we're in Arizona, it does get dark by like 7:30, thank goodness, because it's so hot. But it can be hard to keep your kids on that sleep schedule. So I do think addressing any sleep challenges, and that is not something that is easy to address like the night before school is going to start, right? So it's painful. And I know that it doesn't maybe seem like you really want to do it, but a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, I'm sure the child psychologist in the room would say like 6 weeks before, but for me, it's like a week, I'll be honest. I know. Pre-kids, Mallory would have told us to spend the entire summer.
No, 1 or 2 weeks is great.
Exactly. So I try to do about a week, and we do start to slowly move our bedtimes back. And for us, my kids I have one that's like a morning early riser, one that's like a night owl. So that's always, again, to your point, like, so I just have to stay up with you and get up with you. I can't do all the things. But I think setting up like longer routines. So for us, it's not about like, okay, you're going to start going to bed at 7:30. But if I want my kids sleeping by 8:30, then I'm going to start everything sooner. Like, okay, we're actually going to get some new books from the library. We're all going to read in my bed starting at 7:30, kind of winding down those brains. That can be really helpful and slowly ratcheting it back. So if your kid has been going to bed at 10 or 11 p.m., hey, like, let's start moving it back by 30 minutes and helping with that piece of it. It's definitely, it takes time, right? Your circadian rhythms and that kind of thing. I'm not a full-blown sleep expert by any means, but I think helping your kids to have those kind of routines, if we talk a lot about sleep hygiene. So getting them a consistent routine of like, okay, we're going to take a shower or a bath and brush our teeth and have low lighting, like no big lights on after a certain time. These are all things that can help prepare you for sleep. So that's probably the biggest one that I start with, is the evening, like getting bedtime back on track. And to be fair, I don't let it get too far off track. I'm pretty rigid about sleep because it's hard. But
I am too. And I agree with Katie. The bedtime routine is so important, especially for kids with ADHD, because they are so much more likely than your neurotypical peers to have sleep struggles. And it's biological. They have a harder time falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up feeling rested. And so if you're going to kind of really, leading up to school, invest your time and thought and energy to kind of overhauling a routine, really prioritize that bedtime routine. If your kid isn't sleeping well, you can have the best morning routine. It's still going to, be chaotic. So we really need to focus on getting our kids well slept. And that's my number one priority at home. My friends, you could talk to my friends. They'll tell you like Mallory's the first to leave the party. Like, oh, it's almost, it's an hour and a half till bedtime. We got to go now. Because I just value my kids' sleep so much. I value my own sleep.
That's
I'm a better mom when I'm well slept too. And I'm not sleeping if they're not sleeping. So bedtime routine, 100%.
This is good because it might not be easy, but it is very simple. And it is something that we can all sort of slowly adjust to. And I think even for myself too, evenings have been later, mornings have been later. And so this is helpful. And it's just a good reminder, the sooner we can do it, the easier it'll end up being. But I do want to talk about mornings too, because that is a juggernaut for me in my house. I mean, there's just, it can be just one of the most stressful parts of the day. There's so many things that have to happen and it has to occur in a short amount of time. And, mornings can feel very chaotic. So any recommendations for where we can start instead of like first day back at school, everything's crazy. Any sort of things that you have found helpful or things that we can do to support our mornings when we transition to this back to school thing.
Yeah. So I think just like sleep, it's helpful to start practicing your morning routine a couple days before school starts. So your kids are kind of up and in the habit of getting dressed, not staying in jammies for a couple hours and brushing their teeth and eating sooner than later. That's one of the hard things for my kids is they're just not, they don't have a huge appetite upon waking up. So that's a challenge. But some practical strategies when it comes to morning routines. You've probably figured this out, but do as much as you can the night before. Leave as few decisions as possible for the morning. Have your child decide the night before whether they're bringing a lunch to school or buying hot lunch. maybe even pack the lunch if they're bringing a lunch, have them decide what they're wearing tomorrow the night before, have backpacks packed the night before, leave as few decisions and actions as possible for the morning where things might feel a little more chaotic. And this is where visuals really come in handy. It again, this comes back to executive functioning. Having a challenging time remembering the steps, the order of the steps, remembering what has to happen before you're ready to go to school. And so using some kind of visual schedule in the morning can be so helpful for our kids with ADHD. Just a reminder of this, all the things they got to check off for the morning. Get dressed, brush your teeth, eat breakfast, double check that your backpack is packed, grab your water bottle. There's lots of different visuals you can use. Like you could even have a visual of what needs to be packed in the backpack. You could have a visual, you can actually take a picture of your child of what they look like when they're ready to school, so that when they're ready for school, so they have their shoes on, they have their backpack on, they have their water bottle and their lunchbox in their hand. So it's kind of like Katie would say, like, what do you need to do? Or like, check your body. Is your body ready for school? Anything that you can do, anything that you can kind of visualize and externalize for your child that takes the responsibility off of you to nag and be like, now this, now this, now this, now this. I've already told you to do this. And I guess my other tip, just from personal experience, of like, prioritize what you really care about. So for example, I half of the time send my boys to school in outfits I definitely would not pick for them. Or like today my son is like head to toe gray, and he says it matches because it's all gray. It definitely doesn't match.
Sure.
Love him. It definitely doesn't match. But that's like a battle I'm not going to pick in the morning. Like he's dressed and it's weather appropriate, so he's wearing that to school. So pick your battles for the mornings too. Yeah.
And I think sometimes parents get hung up on this idea of like, well, I don't want to give them a visual schedule because I don't really want to have to like tell them what to do, right? And it feels like, well, if I'm giving them a visual schedule, is that too much prompting or too much support? And what I would say in response to that is lovingly, if you don't have a visual schedule and your child isn't doing it independently, you are telling them what to do, but you're having to remember every single step. If you have 2, 3, 4 kids, you're now doing 8 steps times 3 kids. That's 24 steps that you're prompting, where the visual can become sort of like its own kind of bridge to that independence. But also I use a visual schedule. I mean, it's in my phone every day. I open my phone and I'm like, oh, we're jumping on this podcast at this time. That means I have to be ready by such and such time. And then after that, I have to run over here and I need to remember to pick up all the cookies for the luncheon. So this is how I still, at 41 years old, function, is with a visual schedule. So I think there's this, some people would say like, well, I don't, visual schedule, that just seems so babyish, or like that's too much prompting. And I would say, really, it's more independent. You can have your child, especially if they're over the age of like 6, they can help you. Hey, what's our morning routine? What do we need? And they can make a little list. They can draw it. They can illustrate it. Whatever that Canva now is free, and you can actually go in and like pick cute graphics, whatever you want to do. I feel like this whole generation is like going to be little graphic designers on through AI. But you know, there's a lot of options for that. And, but the idea being that then your prompt is just check your schedule. What does your schedule say? Check your schedule. And you're not going, did you brush? Did you? Are you sure? Let me check your toothbrush. Is it wet? Right? Because that's just, nobody enjoys that. That's so stressful. And so you're kind of giving them more independence by saying, okay, it's you and your schedule. And the other piece when you're using visual schedules, because I hear this all the time, like, oh, we tried it. It didn't work. So when you're teaching a new skill, you really want to remember to connect it to a reward. So putting something interesting or motivating at the end of that visual schedule is very important. And that might be like when you get your visual schedule all checked off, you can actually be like DJ on the way to school, or, you know, you can have 10 minutes of TV time if that's something available. Or like we have a basketball court down the street from our house, and my son will say, if I'm done by 7:20, can I go shoot hoops? And I'm like, sure. Absolutely, you can. So I think connecting it into something motivating is really important. And if it's not working, definitely try to up the ante a little bit. Like maybe that motivational thing, either you don't have one or it's not working anymore, and try to come up with something at the end of that schedule. And we all kind of need that too, like that reward, right? So that can be another strategy to try with visuals in the morning.
That is, I have my visual charts that I made a long time ago, and they're laminated now. And I sent them just like to our Staples. I made it on Canva, like you said. all my children use it. It might be a little bit juvenile now, but it's still super helpful. And I love, Mallory, where you were saying like the visual of like the person who is dressed and holding the things or whatever it is. Like with AI, I think it would be very easy to like even have a photo of your child like dressed appropriately on a day and then, or, print something out. I think it could be so helpful. And you were saying a lot of things about like, you're helping them like with their own independence, but also you're helping them build their confidence because you're not saying, oh, did you do this? Oh, don't forget this. And oh, you forgot to do that. And, all of those little things. And it makes me think of, and I can't tell you the exact numbers, you may know, but it like kids with ADHD are corrected like so much more than
double. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I do want to talk about confidence for this back to school season. It can bring up a lot of emotions for children, for families. Some kids are excited or some are carrying sort of those worries from the previous school year, or they're feeling nervous about academics or friends, or they've just had so many corrections that they start questioning themselves and everything. And so, as we head into the year, how can we intentionally support and help build confidence during this season? If your child is struggling or, I just don't want to unintentionally be reinforcing the idea that they're always getting it wrong or having to be correcting them. Like, how can we help build up more of that confidence in our kids as we head into a new year? Katie, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah. And you're totally right on. Kids with ADHD or, I think it was challenging children, right? Mal was the study that was done, but they got like double the number of corrections in a 30-minute period. And to your point, that can really start to add up and wear on our sense of self-esteem. And kids are very aware, they know when adults in their lives are enjoying them and liking them versus when they're frustrated. So this is a great thing to ask ourselves. And I think it's a couple different things. One is definitely using praise strategically, pointing out the good things that we see our kids doing, taking time to celebrate that. One of the things that comes up on social media is people say like praise is bad. Like it teaches your kid to be dependent on praise. So, there's a lot of nuance to that. Generally, we would say, focus more on praising the process. Like, hey, you worked really hard. Like I saw how much that meant to you. And you really did a great job sharing with your sister, calling out very specific things, those character building traits or the things that your child did in that moment and helping reframe it. Another one is if you are questioning if your child might have ADHD or some other diagnosis, the label can be scary for parents, but oftentimes when you don't have a correct understanding of what's happening in your child's brain, they get a label anyway. It might be a label like, oh, they're so lazy, or they're just so, undisciplined, or so rowdy, or so spacey. The list could go on. And I think that can also be really hurtful. So understanding what's happening in our kids' brains and educating them on that and saying, hey, sometimes it's hard for you to hold your body still in Costco. Yes, it's also very hard for me to hold my body still in Costco. Here's why, and here's what I can do to help myself. Maybe you could try it. Do you want to tap your toe inside your shoe or whatever? Make a game out of it. But I think that when it goes back to the very first thing that we talked about, when we understand why something is more challenging for our kids, we can help them and kind of approach it together. Like, let's problem solve this rather than coming down on them and being like, why are you acting this way? Why are you doing this? And that is, you're still addressing the fact that you can't just touch every shampoo bottle in Costco, like they're going to fall down, but you're not doing it in a way that's filled with shame or judgment. You're helping them to understand their brain. And gosh, that is really hard. Like, what can we do? So I think those little shifts from a parenting perspective, and it doesn't really involve really your child doing anything different. It's actually you as the parent. And that's kind of cool. You can actually really make a big impact in your own experience.
I think the other thing that really helps boost confidence is find something that your child does well and really loves. And for a lot of kids, they feel like they're having a hard time at home. They're getting a lot of corrections from their parents. School is a struggle, even if grades are good, but they're getting in trouble all the time. So find something that your child does well and lean into that and really reinforce that. And so whether it's a sport or it's arts or it's playing an instrument or something like that, when our kids have something that they can lean back on and be like, I'm really good at this and I really like it, that goes a long way for their self-esteem and their confidence.
I agree. I was actually just saying this to someone yesterday. my one son has graduated from his elementary school and he's heading to a different school in the fall, which is a larger school. So I was saying, like, he was kind of like a big fish in a little pond, and it wasn't a super athletic school, and so he's really into athletics. And so any team, his academic goal last year or the year before was to be on every single sports team, and he achieved his goal.
I love
and so
that.
yeah, we really were leaning in, and so his teachers would do the same because he definitely struggles academically. So I do appreciate, like, positive praise. I don't know who doesn't like it and who's suffering or like who's not doing well because they've been praised. So I do appreciate that. And I appreciate the approach that you take with the Childhood Collective, because it's so practical. Like you're saying, like, don't touch the shampoo bottles in Costco. I'm like, oh yes, I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. So for the parent who's listening, someone like they're feeling a little overwhelmed because a lot comes with the back to school stuff. So maybe there's something that we can do. Is there like one small change that you would encourage us to make this fall that could have a really big impact for both our child, for ourselves, for our family? Mallory, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. I would say the mindset shift of my child is naughty, my child's giving me a hard time, to my child needs my support, and I can be that person for my child. I can be that person. And I think that a lot of times parents feel like they can't be, like they're not sure that they have the skills or what it takes, and they need a professional to be the ones to fix this. But I want parents to know that you are the perfect parent for your child, and you can be the support and the help and the teacher that your child needs, and your child can be successful.
I love that. Katie, to wrap it up, if like the parent of a child with ADHD could leave the conversation remembering like just one thing as they head into the school year, what would you want that message to be for the listener?
I would say along the lines of what Mallory said, you're a great parent for your child, but also just loving the child that you have, finding joy in those moments, those quirky times when they do want to touch the shampoo bottles, and you figure out, how to make it into a game. Or when your kid just wants to jam out to a song that maybe is driving you crazy, just turn it up, put the windows down, and lean into some of those moments. Because I think, at least I know for myself, I tend to have this idea of like the right way to parent or the right way that things should look. It's very Pinteresty and it's very organized, and that is totally not my life. And so leaning into that and embracing it in the, kind of the chaos, but also just the kid in front of you, because I know that they absolutely deserve that love. And it can really, again, change your mindset when you lean into that.
That's so true. I'm getting goosebumps and tears in my eyes and feeling all the emotions. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been such an honor to chat with you. I have linked resources in the show notes for this episode for the listener. Anything else you want to point us to before we head out that we can go and check out?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a free parenting guide that we created. It's called 6 Keys to Parenting and Raising a Happy, Independent Child with ADHD. And it's really like the 6 main pillars of what we would talk about with you if we were meeting you over coffee and just chatting about parenting and, parenting a kid with ADHD. So that's a free guide if you want to check that out. And, that can be linked in the show notes as well. But we just wanted to say thank you so much for having us on today and allowing us to chat with your audience. This has been a great conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And yes, definitely go check that out. And let's have a great school year.
Let's do it. Thank you.
As we wrap up, I just want to give a huge, huge thank you to Dr. Mallory Yee and Katie Severson from the Childhood Collective for joining me today. It has been such a joy. I've learned so much. And I think one of the things I appreciated most about this conversation is that it moved beyond simply talking about ADHD and really focused on what so many parents are navigating every day. The reminders and the mental load, the worrying, and that balancing act between wanting to support our kids while also wanting to help them build their confidence, their own independence, and those skills that they are going to need to grow as they get older. As a mom of 3 boys, including a child with ADHD, I totally know how easy it can be to feel like you are carrying all the responsibility and the planning and the remembering. And I also know how much we care and how much we want to get it right and we want to do right by them. So one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is that independence doesn't happen overnight. It is built gradually through the opportunities and the supports and just practicing and trust. And then that back to school transition in school year, it's going to be much smoother with these small and simple supports. It doesn't have to be a giant thing, So if you are listening and heading into fall feeling excited, but also a little nervous, worrying a little bit about the routines changing and that transition, please know that you are not alone. I am right there with you. But I hope that this conversation gave you some practical ideas, some reassurances, and hopefully that permission to lower the pressure on yourself a little and on your kid. Thank you again to Mallory and Katie for sharing their expertise and just the incredible work that they do through the Childhood Collective. I highly encourage you to check out their podcast, Shining with ADHD, and all of the resources that they share for families. Please check out the links in the episode description to learn more and to get the support that you need. And of course, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so honored. I would love it if you shared it with a friend, a fellow parent, an educator, just anyone who wants to support a child with ADHD. These shares help more than you know. Make sure you're following The Juggle is Real wherever you're listening to your podcast so you don't miss these upcoming episodes. Rate, review, all the things. And until the next time, please enjoy these summer moments and those little things that matter most. And remember, the juggle, yes, it might be real, but you do not have to carry it all alone. Take good care.